Psalm 90:10. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength, 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Now, David wrote that psalm, and I forgot. But anyway, basically, you're saying if you're in good shape, you live to your 80, but the years of our life are 70. And that was in the Old Testament of the book of Psalms. Isn't that interesting? Because here we are so arrogant, thinking that we've got it all under control. Our science, our medicine has really expanded the human capacity for life expectancy, all that. And yet, there's lots of evidence that's not necessarily true. And if you don't challenge everything that's upon you now after the last 2 years, I don't know what to tell you, man. But this idea that we are living well abundant lives compared to where we were, when I say abundant, I'm not saying in terms of things, I'm talking about abundant in terms of years. Well, what if that wasn't true? What if people back then, and I'm talking back then, generations and generations ago, lived pretty much as close as we are? Would that change your approach to the dogma of scientism, the marvel of modern medicine? Now, look, things like surgery and stuff, 100%. 100% we need that, without question, modern medicine. But things like just the crap they put you or they want to give you, the drug pushers of big pharma and whatnot, is that really advancing the ball? Something to think about, isn't it? So let's dive into this. I thought this is incredibly interesting. This is from right here. This lady, Catherine Cave, right here. A PhD scholar with the Australian National Union School of Archaeology. And she says, redefining knowledge of elderly people throughout history. This is dateline 4 years ago. So remember, we just don't have that much evidence to say either way if people are living longer now than they did. We don't. I'm going to share with you the proof of that. We're just like, we think, but we don't know. So I guess my number one thing I'm trying to do with this YouTube channel is trying to get you just to think. Think outside the box and just don't go with just because they said, oh, well, they say the average Roman lived to 30 years. Well, how do we know that? I mean, where did they get that? Well, just think, because it's like the average, you need $4 million to retire. How do you know that? Well, that's what they say. Well, how do they get that? All right, so let me show you something here. This is interesting. People sometimes think that in those days, if you lived to 40, that was about as good as it's got. But it's not true. Christine Cave, a PhD scholar, has developed a new method for determining the age of death for skeletal remains based on how worn the teeth are. Using her method, which she developed by analyzing the wear on teeth and comparing with living populations of comparable cultures, she examined the skeletal remains of 3 Anglo-Saxon English cemeteries for people buried between the years 475 and 625. Her research determined that it was not uncommon for people to live to old age. For people living traditional lives without modern medicine or markets, the most common age of death is about 70, she said. And that is remarkably similar among different cultures. She said the myth has been built up due to deficiencies in the way older people are categorized. Older people have been very much ignored in archaeological studies, and part of the reason is that the inability to identify the older people. When you're determining the age of children, you use developmental points like tooth eruption or the fusion of bones that happens at a certain age. Once people are fully grown, though, it becomes increasingly difficult to determine their age from skeletal remains, which is why most studies just have the highest age category of 40 or 45. So effectively, they don't distinguish between a healthy 40-year-old and a frail 95-year-old. It's meaningless if you're trying to study old people. We just throw them off. So yeah, we think people live to 40, so we'll just say to 40. She says the new method will give archaeologists a more accurate view of past societies and what life was like for older people. Interesting. All right, so I want to share this. That was interesting. So then we go over here. Do we really live longer than our ancestors? This is from BBC, and this comes down to 2018 as well. So this is an article written after Christine Cave written. The wonders of modern medicine and nutrition make it easy to believe we enjoy longer lives than at any time in human history, but we may not be that special at all. A great article. You should read it. I like this article because it kind of gives both sides, not like most typical mainstream media just gives one side. The natural conclusion that both miracles of modern medicine and public health have helped us live longer than ever before, so much so that we may in fact be running out of innovations to extend life further. In September 2018, the Office of National Statistics confirmed that the UK, at least, life expectancy has stopped increasing and the gains are slowing without the world. However, it's common belief that ancient Greeks or Romans would have been flabbergasted to see anyone above the age of 50. In fact, while medical advances have improved many aspects of healthcare, the assumption that human lifespan has increased dramatically is misleading. All right, the lifespan of humans opposed to life expectancy, which is a statistical construct, hasn't really changed at all, says Walter Scheidel. All right, the lifespan, life expectancy is an average. If you have two children, one dies before the first birthday and one lives to 70, the life expectancy is 35. But it doesn't give us the full picture. It becomes especially problematic when looking at eras where there are high levels of infant mortality. Most of human history has been blighted by poor survival rates among children. I've said that 1,000 times, talking about Ignaz Semmelweis and whatnot. But if one's 30s were a decrepit old age, ancient writers and politicians don't seem to have got the message. In the early 7th century BC, the Greek poet Hesiod wrote that man should marry when you're not much less than 30 and not much more. Meanwhile, ancient Rome's cursus honorum, the sequence of political office as an ambitious young man will undertake, didn't even allow a young man to stand for his first office until the age of 30. And don't forget, you got to be 35 in the U.S. to hold the presidency, and that was in the late 1700s. Pliny devoted an entire chapter of the natural history to people who lived longest. Among them, he lists the consul, some guy lived 100 years, some wife who lived 103, another woman, 115, who had 15 children, an actress. Then there are tombstone inscriptions and grave epigrams, such as this one for a woman who died in Alexandria in the 3rd century BC. She was 80 years old, but able to weave a delicate weft in the shrill shuttle. All right, but this back in 1994, I'll let you guys read. That's great. So the couple things that jump, and there's another one too. Hold on a second. I do want. This is 2005. How did we get the age of life expectancy of like 30 to 40 in medieval times and old times? Well, we looked at popes. So this lady looked at we found 81 popes. That's it. That's 81 popes. And then she looked at some aristocrats too. So she looked at 81 popes or a 426 male artist. That's it. And that's not long. That's not a sample size big. And I'm not even saying the other lady from Christina Cave's got a big enough sample size. But 81 popes? But they had the finest medical treatment of the time, Josh. Was it really that fine? Is it kind of like today when you're thrown into the ER and they give you remdesivir in a freaking ventilator? Is that really the finest treatment of the time? We know if you read Ignaz Semmelweis' book, I forgot the guy who wrote it. Oh my goodness, so cute. That there's 2 wards for infants, for women expecting a baby. You go to ward 1, your goose is cooked. You go to ward 2, you're fine. Because the highfalutin medical doctors of the time were going to ward 1, and they didn't they didn't wash their stuff, utensils, they didn't wash their hands or anything like that. You go to ward 2, it's the midwives. For some reason, the midwives took greater caution on that stuff. So you go to ward 2, you come out alive with your child. You go to ward 1, not very high probability you would come out alive, even though you went to the better trained medical professionals of the time. You think that could have been the same case back in the old days too? The higher trained medical professionals, do you think they hurt you or helped you? I'd say they probably hurt you. Just no different than going to the ER today for you know what. Anyway, you got to question everything, man, because everything is on the table now. Everything, to include 2 dogs wrestling. So something to think about. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We'll see you.